Sarah is from Japan and she's also dyslexic. As a dyslexic herself, she is passionate about helping children with dyslexia and also supporting parents with children with dyslexia. She is also in the Orton Gillingham Academy and is certified at the associate level and is currently working towards completing her certified level certification. Her long-term goal is to help spread awareness of language learning-based differences in Japan. So let's delve into this interview with Sarah. Hello and welcome to Think Dyslexia Network. I am Dr. Lauren and I have an amazing guest today that I'm so excited to introduce. Can you introduce yourself for us today?
Of course. Hi, my name is Sarah Takeuchi. I am Japanese. I'm from Japan, but I currently live in Canada, Vancouver, Canada, to be specific. I am a learning specialist at a private school here, and I teach language remediation to children with different sorts of specific learning disabilities or language disabilities.
Yeah. That's awesome. So we're both learning specialists. That's really
yes.
Cool. So I know our audience is really excited to learn more about what dyslexia looks like in Japan and what it looks like in the Japanese culture. So I have 4 major questions that I'm going to outline just so people kind of know where we're going. So the first one is more about what your experience was like in the K through 12 international school setting as a dyslexic, and maybe a little bit about your diagnosis. I'm really interested in learning about what the Japanese community looks like in terms of, is dyslexia talked about? Is it supported? And then also, I'm in the academy as well, certified at the associate level. So I'm really curious to know if your personal journey drove you to the Orton Gillingham method. And the last one, I know that you wanted to touch on executive functioning and how you support students. So let's start with our first question, Sarah. So you are Japanese and you grew up in Japan in a K through 12 international school as a dyslexic. So what was your experience like, and when were you diagnosed?
Yeah, I was diagnosed my freshman year. So when I was 15, when I transferred to my high school, the school counselor noticed that my homework and project assignments were pretty good, or the grades were pretty good, but my tests and quizzes, they were all basically failing and ended up dropping down my overall grade down. So that's when the school did an informal assessment and referred me to a psychologist who was living in Japan and who was able to do a whisk in English, because I think he was an American.
Okay.
And he diagnosed me as dyslexic. So that's the story of how I was diagnosed. But I also want to touch on my experience growing up being dyslexic before I was diagnosed. And I loved school growing up. I just loved it. I basically just went there to meet my friends and play sports and kind of chat with teachers. I kind of liked the social environment. And I played a lot of sports growing up at school and outside of school, which helped me build my confidence in who I was as a person. But I can't imagine being dyslexic, and if the only way to calculate your self-worth was within that academic grading system, I was probably a completely different person today. And it's funny because once I was diagnosed and once I was able to get these accommodations, I was terrified.
Really?
And
wow.
Yeah, because getting accommodations meant that you'll be pulled out from your classes, especially when you're taking tests or quizzes. And that means that all my teachers and all my friends are going to know that I was very different.
Right.
And my teenage brain kind of interpreted that as there's something wrong with you. You're not normal. And, when you're going through high school, you just want to avoid any humiliation. Like you're so uncomfortable in your own body already. And adding that, oh, you're dyslexic, and, that term that you kind of never heard before. And you're like, oh, okay, I need help. But I think I'm doing fine.
Right.
So I just wanted to avoid any like standout things. And so at the beginning, in some of the classes that I was taking, I denied accommodations.
Of course.
Bad idea. but slowly but surely, a lot of the teachers and friends and, my parents kind of helped me understand that it's not weird, it's not odd. You just learn differently and we can help you with that. And so I really thank my school and people around me, honestly, that to help me get the diagnosis, go through internal conflict that I had, because I can't imagine graduating high school, let alone going to university, graduating university without any accommodations.
Right.
So I really am thankful for all the teachers and friends and my parents who supported me throughout that phase.
Yeah, and I definitely want to touch on the peer aspect. So I am a learning specialist in middle school, and this is now, I guess, my fifth year in the middle school setting. I was in elementary prior to, and the secondary years are really challenging because you hit puberty, you care more about what your peers think about you. So I've seen that student that you described, where it's like they definitely know they need that support, but then they're like, what are my friends going to think if I'm pulled out?
Yeah.
How am I going to respond? So I think that is like a global thing with just teenagers, that can be
Absolutely.
in Canada, in the United States, and Japan. So I guess another thing I wanted to ask you too was, you were fluent in both English and Japanese throughout your entire schooling?
I would use the term fluent very mildly.
Okay.
Being dyslexic, language is not your best friend. So
Right.
I did speak Japanese at home, and I, I learned English in basically the end of kindergarten, like going into grade one, all the curriculum, all the classes, all the teachers were like speaking in English. Um, but I wouldn't say I was fluent in both. I was more of trying to, if I were to construct a sentence, it would be both mixed Japanese and
Mhm.
English, whether it be words or grammar or sentence structure. So it wouldn't make sense to anybody who only understood English or who only understood Japanese. So
Interesting.
the way that I probably communicated was kind of mixture, this hybrid of Japanese English that only
Right.
bilingual people can understand.
No, that's really interesting. And I'm already thinking this could be like a part two interview, because there's so
Oh,
much to unpack here. But I want to shift to our next question. And I think this is a really good segue. So how are learning differences viewed in the Japanese culture and community? Were you supported by your parents? I know that I've heard in Asian culture, there's a lot of working hard, and they're high expectations. And I'm curious to know, are learning differences discussed, and were you supported?
it's a disappointing answer, I would say.
Okay.
Um, from my experience and my understanding, and I don't want to say this is what it is in Japan or this is what it is in Asia,
Right.
but from the community that I was in and where I belonged, language disabilities, dyslexia, ADHD, all of these things were just denied, non existent.
Right.
Um, I remember trying to explain to my parents' friends, or sorry, my friends' parents, about how I couldn't read or how I had trouble reading and writing. And they were interested, they were nice about it, and they were willing to hear me out. But I could tell by their facial expressions that they weren't
You were confused.
grasping.
Yeah.
Well, they were really nice about it though, and they were the ones who wanted to talk about it. But
Mhm.
because I looked normal like their kids and I sounded normal like their kids from the outside, uh, they had they
A
had
hard time.
trouble kind of understanding what I meant. And I think they were Japanese, but I think their perspective somewhat reflects the view of the Japanese community in a way. But in terms of my parents, I was really lucky. My father is He's not diagnosed because that's not a thing in Japan,
Of course.
especially back then when he was going through school.
Right.
But I suspect that he has ADHD and dyslexia because
Okay.
it's hereditary. If I have it, it's either one of my parents. And I just know it's my dad. And I will get into that a little bit more. But um, like for example, one time we Skype because I live here and then they're back home. We were Skyping and my dad started to shave. He just decided that he was gonna shave while I was Skyping with him, and and slowly I just saw the shift in the tone of his voice that his attention just shifted from talking to me to like, oh, I have little spots here or whatnot. And after he was done, he kind of forgot that I was there. So he left me. And that's not the only time. Is that another time I was Skyping with him and, I think he felt thirsty. So he went into the kitchen, brought me like the iPad to the kitchen. He made us drink, and he went back to the living room without me. And then, so every time that happens, I just have to hang up, call my mom, because she's the one who's not dyslexic or ADHD. So I will call my mom and be like, hey, I think dad left his iPad in the kitchen. Like, can you come pick me up? So I have a lot of fun with my family. And so like I said, my mother is not the one with the learning disability at all.
Right.
She is the majority, like the neurotypical, but she's the
Right.
minority in the house.
Okay.
Right.
Right.
So when she met my dad and they got married, she started noticing all these odd stuff, like not coming on time to things as an
Right.
adult, or
That's rude, right?
it's rude. And also like he doesn't enjoy reading, and my mom
Mm.
loves reading.
Loves reading. Okay.
Mhm. And she can comprehend like really quickly. And my dad would struggle reading a word at a time. And my mom was like, that's probably not typical for
Mhm.
somebody who's an adult who only grew up in Japan and the only language he speaks is Japanese. And another, red flag is that he would mispronounce like common words all the
Mm.
time. And I think that's his phonemic awareness. Like that's what he
Yes.
right? And now I know that these are all the signs of ADHD and dyslexia, but he's
Right.
not diagnosed because he fell through the cracks and, there wasn't any support for people like that. Um, but because he had a lot of difficulty going through school, he understood me so much. He was like the biggest supporter. He knew that I was gonna make it. I don't know what that meant, but he was like, you're gonna be fine. We can do this. And
I love
so
that.
And my mom did a lot of research, even though a lot of the materials and like how to support kids with dyslexia wasn't available in Japanese. She
Mm.
did a lot of research. She read all these like English journal articles and research articles to kind of help to kind of understand who my dad was, because she
Right.
thought like that's not normal. And
Yeah.
so she learned that it was hereditary. So when I was born, she kind of kept an eye out,
Mhm.
even though she's not trained in education or learning disabilities at all. She just kind of like looked out for me. And I think once my sentence construction was delayed from my peers, she was like, yeah, I think that she has something. So
Dang.
yeah, so that's how I got all the support.
Right.
And yeah, when I was diagnosed in my high school, I actually had to repeat grade 9 because
Wow.
my grades just weren't keeping up.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and then the school jumped in, they helped me out. And when I actually got that diagnosis, my parents were so happy. I remember like celebrating because to them it was like, finally we
Yeah.
can give you the support that you always
Neat.
needed.
Right. Right.
So I think I'm really lucky. I know that not a lot of kids grew up in Asia kind of get that support from the parents and the community. So despite the friends of parents or outside of my immediate circle, I was very, very lucky.
No, I really appreciate you sharing that story because I don't think a lot of people recognize that it is hereditary, or that maybe there is one parent or both parents that have this learning difference. And and this obviously shifts into the next question, but when I first started my career at a private dyslexic school, that's where I was Orton Gillingham trained. So I started in this school not knowing what dyslexia was, being a special educator, didn't know what dyslexia was, and had no idea what Orton Gillingham was. But because I was set up in the very start of my career, learning about structured literacy, learning about the multisensory approach, and really understanding this language-based learning difference, I was having conferences with parents that were like, I think I might be dyslexic. So I think that it's really, you having this Orton Gillingham foundation and training, brought awareness to you about your dad, and being an educator, you can really say, oh, okay, now I understand. And obviously your dad and your mom had that understanding to support you. And that makes a world of difference. I mean, and you probably know that, yourself, because look where you are now. And that's just amazing.
Oh, thank
So
you.
yeah, so I'm assuming that because of your journey, that's what drew you to Orton Gillingham. Am I wrong, or is there a different path that drove you to get certified?
No, you are absolutely correct.
Yeah, no. So how long have you been in the academy?
I've well, I first I've been working for this is my fourth year,
Okay.
almost the end of fourth year. And the first year is like the first year that you get trained for the associate level. And I
Yes,
completed my associate level my first year. So I've been in the academy for, I guess, four years now.
that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very excited. I'm starting my certified training soon. I have been in the academy, gosh, I think since 2014, 2015. Yeah, it's been a while, and I really want to plunge right back in. I want to do the morphology. I want to have the training. I really want to be more well versed in not just being at the associate level. So we can talk more OG stuff at another time.
Yes.
That's awesome. So, Sarah, I want to lead us into our last question for our audience, because I think this is really important too. So, you've been an executive functioning coach for a few years, and I know that you would love to talk more about that. So, can you share more about what kind of supports you provide for students that have executive functioning challenges?
Absolutely. So executive function is basically an umbrella term for the background knowledge for the audience. It controls your like inhibitory control or cognitive and emotional flexibility, task initiation, working memory, and planning and organizational skills, all that fun stuff. Those life skills that we
Right.
kind of expect people to to
You. Right.
and then I was first interested in this because once I started doing the Orton Gillingham approach and like language remediation, I quickly saw the limitation of it for students who are severely dyslexic or severely ADHD. And I
Right.
wondered, what can I do if these students continue to struggle to read and write? And what are some ways that I could help? So then they're still successful in life. And
Mhm.
I think the answer for now, at least for me, is EF coaching. And that's because it helps them build self awareness. And self awareness does wonders for a lot of people. And we
Sure
can
does.
all use a little bit more self awareness because knowing their strengths and weaknesses can help them play the cards right in university or even at work. Like, I want to share two examples here. Is that I've seen a grade 12 student who was falling behind in her schoolwork. So she had a lot to submit before she could actually graduate high school.
Mhm.
Um, but she was so excited to go to university on all that fun stuff that happens after graduating,
Right.
right?
Right.
And she had trouble seeing all the small details, like the steps to get to that point. And
Mhm.
this is a typical student with like planning and prioritizing skill issue or like the lack of. And where EF coaching is very helpful is that we can help them figure out to fill out those steps so they can get from point A to point B.
Right.
And what we want to do is use different strategies. So in the future, they're comfortable enough to use the strategy that works for them on their own. And
Right.
another example is that I have a lot of students who can't keep their material organized,
Hmm.
right? These are students who have issues with material organization, and they just lose things and kind of hope that they don't have to submit that thing, or
Right. Out
they
of
kind of
sight, out of
hope that,
mind.
yeah, and they kind of hope that they don't need a pencil today. Um, so a lot of the times with these students, I decided to make a visual checklist that can be clipped on their backpack. And what I would do is that these are, again, students with decoding issue as well. So I would write homework, maybe like a emoji of a homework, and like
Right.
pencil case with an emoji of a pencil, and to make it very visual.
Yes.
And what's interesting is that it's not perfect. They're not going to come every day prepared just because they have a checklist.
Hmm.
But slowly but surely, they make it into a habit and say, "Ooh, I don't have a water bottle. Well, is that okay? Well, yeah, I guess it's fine. Well, I don't have a pencil case. Well, I guess that's an issue." So they would
Right.
actually try to pack things on their own. So it's building independence.
Hmm.
And it's interesting because the longer they do it, they can now mentally visualize that checklist and know what goes in the backpack. And I think, again, this takes a lot of time. It doesn't happen overnight. Um, but it it equips them with the strategy that they can use. These are transferable skills that they can use independently for work or for university or for after school curriculum. I
Hmm.
don't have to make all those for them. I just give them the strategy, use different strategies, and let them choose what strategy works for them. So yeah, EF is I believe it's a life tool, and I think everyone can benefit from it.
No, I love those examples. And I absolutely agree with you. They are life skills, and getting to things on time matter, knowing how to prioritize your calendar. I mean, for me personally, I have several to-do lists because I myself have ADHD, and sometimes I get overwhelmed if I don't have it in the right place, or I don't check off things, or I get overwhelmed if I haven't even written a to-do list. So
Mhm.
I think executive functioning is definitely a buzzword that parents are now getting more well versed in knowing what it is, rather than like, my kid's just chaotic, or my kid just doesn't know how to organize. And really, it's like similar to you with your diagnosis, like, here's what is going on. Now
Mhm.
let's know how to support my child or this student. So Sarah, this was such a great interview, and I am so happy that we could find this time to really delve into your life experiences, what this looked like for you growing up in Japan. And I'm also really excited to meet another member in the academy. So this is like a win-win on so many levels.
Well, Dr. Lauren, I really love what you're doing, and I'm really honored to be in one of your series or to be interviewed by you. So, thank you so much for having me on your platform.
Yes, thank you. And maybe we can look to do another part two to delve more into.
Absolutely, yes.
Yes. All right, Sarah. Well, have a good rest of your afternoon.
Thank you. You too.